Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Danielle, and I'm with the Highlands Ranch Community Association. Thank you so much for being with us and for purchasing a ticket tonight and everyone picking up their sample kit. I really appreciate it. We have a great lineup for you tonight and such a special occasion that we're able to do this with all of the limited editions. One positive thing that COVID has brought us is being able to do something like this that we had never been able to do before, because we've never had this type of ability to have all of these limited editions tasted in one location like this. So this is a very special night for a lot of us to be able to taste these. And with all of that, just want to thank Davidson's for being a part of this as well and sponsoring all of our virtual events. Without them, we would not be able to do this. And thank you to Austin, who is with us tonight, and he's with Remy Cointreau. He will be teaching you all about all of these limited editions, so special shout out to him. And if you wouldn't mind trying to stay muted just when Austin's doing his presentation, so that we don't have all the background noise, that would be awesome. And once you start kind of talking back and forth, that's fine if he's asking questions. But if not, feel free to add things into the chat box and he can answer questions that way too. And with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Austin.
Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate that. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking some time out of your evening to come join us and drink some good spirits. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now, and hopefully that should bring up how you're seeing it. This is not presenting right, so give me just a second. There we go. That just stopped everything. Wouldn't be a Zoom masterclass without some technical difficulties. So hopefully everybody can see our little entry slide right here. And right here, we're going to go ahead. We're going to start off with a cocktail because I am a big fan of, it's a lot easier to listen to people talk if you have something in your hands to drink. So we are going to start off. You're going to need your vial of Bruichladdich Classic Latte. It should have completely full, and it should have like a light blue label on it. Once you grab that, you're also going to need a mixing glass, a jigger, and a spoon, and also your simple syrup and bitters, which is that itty bitty vial, which I'm having some issues here. So give me just a moment. What? Oh my goodness, my computer's being goofy. All right, now we got to figure it out. So first things first, we are going to take, sorry about the delay, we're going to take 2 ounces, which should be the full vial of Bruichladdich, the Classic Latte, which that's how you say that nice little word right there. And we're going to go ahead and add that straight into our mixing glass, or pint glass if you don't have a mixing glass. All right. Give everybody a second to do that. The next thing you're going to need is your simple syrup. And you're going to need a ½ ounce of that, which I believe should be the full amount, but it's still good to check. So take a ½ ounce of that. And this is actually what's going to make this our holiday old fashioned. This is actually a cinnamon and nutmeg simple syrup that I made with turbinado sugar. So that is like an unrefined brown sugar. And this is really going to kind of give you almost like a sugar cookie / baking spice fun aspect added to your old fashioned. And this is a really nice way to feel festive when you drink, which any excuse, right? Next thing you're going to do is you're going to add your Angostura bitters, which should be that itty bitty little brown bottle. And that'll have a little orifice on top. If you turn that over and tap the bottom of the vial right over your shaker tin, it should come out pretty easy. That one's not going to give full dashes, so I do about 5 or 6 little drops from that little dropper. If you're at home and you have some extra different types of bitters and you like to play around, I'm actually adding some orange bitters to mine as well. Just give it that extra little orange flavoring that turns out really well with this whiskey. Then you're going to add some ice to your shaker glass and also add some ice to your rocks glass and get that prepared for you. Adding our ice in here to our shaker glass, or excuse me, our stirring glass. Grab your spoon, stick it in there and stir it up. So what we're going for here is we're diluting it. And as you're kind of feeling the outside of the glass, you're just going to stir basically until the outside of the glass is nice and cold. And that takes different amounts of times with different types of ice. Everybody's ice maker makes different types. Once that's diluted, add your strainer or some way to strain out the ice from the liquid and strain the liquid right into your glass. And there is your holiday old fashioned. So cheers, everyone. We're going to get into it. The way that I'm going to do this, I'm going to talk briefly about each brand. So we have 3 different brands that we're going to be talking about today. All are limited editions. So these all released around the same time this year, which is unusual for us. All are very limited. Colorado did not get more than maybe 100 bottles of each. So very, very limited supply, some less than others. Actually, we had fewer Westland than 100 bottles. So this is a very unique situation. This is a very unique occurrence. And thank you to HRCA for hosting this for us. This is a lot of fun and something that's new and unique for me as well. So we don't usually get to share these exciting new limited releases with tasting samples. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of each distillery, and then we'll get into the spirit. When we're tasting the spirit, I'll kind of walk you through that as well. So the first one that we're going to start with is the Mount Gay. Steve, at the end, I will actually share a recipe for the simple syrup as well. So we're going to start with the Mount Gay, which should be the one without a label in your kit. The other 2 should have labels. This is the one that we're looking at here. And if you have a Glencairn glass, which is what this type of glass is, or some sort of tulip-shaped glass, this is ideal for what we're going to be doing, how we're going to be tasting. If not, rocks glasses will do just fine as well. So I like to pour my spirit out a little early and let it open up and breathe a little bit, especially since everything that we are going to be talking about today is higher ABV. So I'm going to pour that. I'm going to set that aside, and we're going to talk a little bit about Mount Gay. I know a lot of you have actually joined our Mount Gay Masterclass, so this will be kind of an overall. And then when we're getting into tasting the port cask, feel free if you have other questions to reach out and ask. So Over 300 years of history is a big, big statement. We have deeds that put us back into the 1650s, that we have been making rum since 1654. We have continuously been making rum since 1703. That puts us at 317 years of continuously making rum. That is a very long time to make a spirit, which also gives us a lot of opportunity to perfect and experiment. So rum, as a basic category, is an alcoholic spirit that's distilled from molasses or some other form of a fermented sugarcane product. So in the 1600s and a little earlier, sugarcane production was massive on Barbados. It was an English colony, and the English like their tea, and sugar is necessary to drink tea for the English customs. So they found out sugarcane grew really well on Barbados, and part of the byproduct of sugarcane production is molasses. So back when they were originally starting to create this sugarcane and sugar and having this molasses as a byproduct, they thought it was trash. So they would actually dump it into ditches and just leave it there. So there's natural wild yeast that flies around in the air in Barbados, and it actually started to ferment the molasses, which turned it into alcohol. And slaves and homeless people would actually drink the fermented molasses out of ditches, and it would get them drunk. So a well-to-do individual, wealthy landowner, figured out that if they distill that, they can sell it. And it actually became such a big deal to have rum for your plantation that every plantation on Barbados had their own distillery. And molasses got rebranded as black gold. This is important because all of the profits that a distillery made, or excuse me, a plantation made from distilling rum, paid for all of their expenses for the entire year of making sugarcane. So all of their sugar that they would produce out of this was pure profit. And this molasses turned into a very big deal for them. We do a combination of pot and column still. What you're seeing right here is actually our pot stills. We have a couple of different styles. Pot stills are going to give you a very unique type flavor. Think like chocolate covered bananas. And then we also do column still. And actually what you're looking at right there is a coffee still. I believe that's one of 4 coffee stills actually in use still today. Column still, coffee still, is a type of column still, is going to produce a really high ABV product without a whole lot of flavor. So, and I'm going to say 99.9% of all Mount Gay that we put out is a blend of pot and column still. The 0.1% is the limited edition from last year, which is pure pot still, which was a nice way to kind of explore how the flavoring comes from pot still. So we have a signature style that comes from how we blend this these rums together. So we're going to do a full term maturation. So we're going to take all of our column still and we're going to put that into certain types of casks, ex-American whiskey, ex-bourbon, or ex-cognac, or in this case, we actually have some experimental casks, which we get to a little bit, and we age that all alone. And then we take all of our pot still and we age that separately as well. And then once they age individually, then we blend them all together and we look for house style and consistency. So we want every bottle of Mount Gay that is the same style to taste the same. And all of a Mount Gay style has these 4 flavors: fresh vanilla, almond, ripe banana, and dark chocolate. In some way, shape, or form, we are going to have those flavors expressed in our rums. One of our most popular is our Mount Gay Black Barrel. This is obviously it's a blend of column and pot still. We age in ex-American whiskey, and we finish in ex-bourbon barrels with a level 4 char. So it's going to have that alligator level char. It's what it's called, and it is going to give it a lot of whiskey characteristics. It's about 12 months on ex-bourbon casks. The next one we have up in the step here is our XO, and this is actually 3 different casks. So Black Barrel, 2 different casks, XO, 3 different casks. And this is ex-American whiskey, ex-bourbon, and then we throw in some cognac casks as well. All of these aged individually and then blended together by our master blender, Trudy Ann Branker. You're going to note the flavor profile is just slightly different. So now everybody should have their glass of Mount Gay Port Cask Expression in front of them. So I'm going to move right on here to this guy. We're going to go ahead and we're going to start tasting this one. So you got the cocktail in front of you. Hopefully it opens you up a little bit. You got you ready for some booze, because this is going to be 110 proof. So 55% ABV. It's going to be a little higher than what you're normally used to. So part of how we are going to taste this is we're going to take it and we're going to nose it first. So part of nosing it, you're going to place your nose near the top. Don't try to shove it all the way in. Part your lips, breathe through your nose and out through your mouth, and it'll actually kind of help you to taste what you're smelling. And here's the fun time. Here's where if you want to unmute and jump in and tell me some of the things that you're smelling as you're going through this. And for any novices, the first hit that you're smelling is port. So that's that smell, that fruity smell that you're getting right off the bat is going to be that port cask expression.
I was thinking I smelled the sweet caramel or the buttered caramel.
Okay, nice. And I see sweet vanilla here in the chat. Both good, astute observations.
Kind of go with hazelnut. Yeah. Hazelnut?
A little bit in there. A little bit, yeah. So now that you've got a nice little nose on it, take a small amount and put it in your mouth and kind of roll it around your tongue. Don't swallow it right away. What you're doing is you're getting your palate ready for more. So it's really kind of opening it up. This is going to be a little hot. It's going to burn a little bit. But when you do this, it's actually the next drink is going to be a lot smoother and a lot cleaner. So while we're kind of letting that sit a little bit, this is different than what the rest of our range normally is. So each year, Mount Gay is going to come out with something we call a master blender collection, and each year it's experimental. So we are playing around. We're trying different things. Last year was a pure pot still. The year before that was a peat smoke expression, and that one was very, very unique. And the one that we have here as well, port cask. So we did a combination of our column still, aged for about 5 years in port casks, ex-port casks. So casks that held port before. We then purchased them, brought them here, and made our new make spirit that came right off of a column still and put it right into tawny port casks. And then we took column still and we put that in ex-American whiskey casks for 10 years. And then we transferred that 10-year-old rum from American whiskey casks to port casks for a further year. And then we took all that pot still that has seen 11 years in 2 different types of casks. And then we took all of that column still that has seen 5 years always in port casks, and we blended them together. And that's where we get this spirit that we have in front of us right now. So now that you've kind of let your palate kind of see that right now, first rum drink. Okay, yeah, this is a big step for a first rum drink. But now that we've had it kind of on our palate, go back and visit the smell again, visit the nose again, and it's really going to open up and really change for you. And that's because your body is now a little bit more prepared for what you're actually going to be tasting. And then the second time around, I already saw somebody said they're getting a lot more caramel on the second sip. Now you get to taste that sweetness and really get to experience the full spirit. One of the things that always gets me is if you take a first sip of a spirit, and it is very smooth. You don't really taste much of anything. It's just like, oh wow, that didn't burn, that didn't do anything. There's a lot of added sugar in that. That's typically what sugar is going to do on your palate, is cut off any of that opportunity to really taste anything. So that's where, if you do what that commonly known as a Chattanooga chew, what we did before, and it's kind of burning a little bit, that's telling you that your second sip is really going to be something unique and different from the first. So Gary, a lot of your flavors is going to come from, one, we're working with molasses. So you're going to get a lot of that flavor coming from the molasses. Our wild yeast that actually propagates there in Barbados is offering some flavoring as well. And a significant amount of the flavoring is going to come from your wood casks. So as you age in different types of casks that have held different liquids before, it's going to impart some of those flavors, as well as some of the standard flavors that oak is known for, which is your vanillas and things along those lines. So the older something is, the older a spirit is, the more it's going to speak to the casking. And typically the younger it is, the more it'll speak to your starting ingredients, so grain or molasses or whatever spirit we're actually talking about. So what do we think now that we've had a couple of sips? What's our impression of the Mount Gay port cask? Mark, that's a good question. A lot of it is NDAs that we have to sign, so they're not, we're not really allowed to say. When you think of big American whiskey brands, the ones that come to mind are most likely where we are grabbing casks from. We produce a lot of liquid, and they produce a lot of liquid, so we can buy a lot of casks from them. And as a way to adjust to the warmth a little bit, if you want to add a drop or two of water, that will, since this is overproof, it will actually kind of help to open it up a little bit, just like a higher end whiskey. So if it's a little too warm as you're adjusting to it, a couple of drops of water will really help to open this up. It does hit you a little bit there, doesn't it, Mike? If you are not prepared for it, a 55% ABV product will come in swinging, come in hard. So it's all about as many things as you can do to really kind of prep yourself for it. And then even then, it's still, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong for adding a little bit of water. Any questions about Mount Gay? Anything I didn't go over that you guys would really like to hear right now? Okay. Mount Gay is in Barbados. So this is good. It's a good question, Jim, because I actually did not talk about the name Mount Gay. So Mount Gay comes from Sir John Gay Alleyne, who was our master distiller in the late 1700s, early 1800s. He was a friend of the owner, the owner made really bad rum. His name was Sir John Sober. He just was not a very good distiller. So his friend, Sir John Gay Alleyne, basically took over the distillery, and they renamed it from Mount Gilboa to Mount Gay after Sir John Gay Alleyne, after he passed. The Mount comes from the fact that we are in Barbados, which is a coral reef island that does not have a whole lot of elevation change. It's not like a volcanic island where you can get really large volcanic islands, mountains that are made. But instead, anything that's over 50 meters high in Barbados is considered a mountain. So we are on a hill for lack of a better word. And that's where we get the Mount from. So Mount Gay, Sir John Gay Aline. And I saw somebody else. Cost per bottle, Donna, that's a good question. We will actually address that at the end. We have Davidson's on the line here, and we're going to chat about that a little bit too for each one. Sir John did not get his rum from the ditches, Jim. He came in, and actually Sir John Gay Aline, the reason why we renamed the distillery after him is he pioneered the double copper pot distillation method. Back in the day, we actually have some papers and things written about him that they called it his double distilled rum. And that's where we figured out he's the one that kind of pioneered that for Mount Gay. And that's really what brought Mount Gay to an upper echelon within rum on Barbados. Okay. It's so it's 5-year-old column still for 5 years in Tawny Port Cask, and then it's 14-year-old, 15-year-old total, 14-year copper still in ex-American whiskey, and then 1 additional year in Port Cask. So this is a blend of 5 and 15-year-old rum. A young rum would be probably 2 years. You get something that's called static aging out in Barbados that is due to the fact that you're getting a lot more maturation happening in a short amount of time. So static tropical aging is out in Barbados. In the first couple of years, we actually look at about a 12 to 15% Angel's share. So that's a 12 to 15% evaporation, which means there's a lot of movement between the liquid and the wood. In Scotland, for instance, they look at a 2% Angel's share. So it's a very significant change in how fast it can mature. So young rums aren't necessarily as young as what a young whiskey might taste like. The longest time you would age a spirit, like I said, you lose 2% on average in some of these places year over year over year. The oldest that I've heard of aging is Louis the 13th, and that's up to 100 years old. I'm sure there is some one-off stuff, and Louis is a cognac, but I'm sure there's some one-off things that I know there's a couple of Macallan whiskeys that are 60, 70 years old. The longer you age something, typically the more expensive it gets exponentially. So you kind of price yourself out of a market really quick the longer that you sit on something. So on average, the average length that you're going to see something aged is typically at most 25 to 30 years, depending on what part of the world you're aging it in. Okay. Well, now that we've had a little bit of, does age impact proof? Depending on where you're at, typically out here in Colorado, if you age it, your proof is going to go up. Sometimes, like we have Westland, which we're going to be talking about next, typically where they age it at, it's fairly static and sometimes goes down. Most of the time goes down. So it's really just kind of a matter of your atmospheric conditions. And that's really going to change your proof. So yes, what you put liquid into a barrel at, that proof will change depending on where you're at, up or down. Any other questions on Mount Gay before we move on to, I believe it's Westland? We will post a copy after this. We will we'll put it up so that you can watch the all of my beauty again all over. All right. So the next one that we're going to move to is going to be Westland. And again, if you have this one, it's gonna probably look similar to this. The label should. And again, I would recommend pouring that into a clean, fresh Glencairn if you have it. If you have a Westland one, you are you are stepping up. So pour that, and then we'll talk a little bit about Westland, and then we'll get to chatting about this one. So Westland Distillery, what you see here up in the top left where there is a little red diamond, that is actually where we're based. It's a Seattle-based distillery. Started in 2010 by two gentlemen named Matt Hoffman and Emerson Lamb. So Matt Hoffman was the brains behind the distillation. Emerson Lamb was the funds. He came from a logging family. They had some expendable income to invest. And on Matt's 21st birthday, they opened the distillery. So Matt is nothing short of a savant when it comes to whiskey, has always been obsessed with flavors and how they can express themselves differently throughout distillation and so on and so forth. So that's why he decided to start Westland. This is 100% malted barley, non-chill filtered, no coloring added. And now we get to get into him experimenting. So we'll talk a little bit about the house style, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the experimental range. So there are 4 ingredients that are going to make up whiskey. It's water, malted barley, yeast, and oak. So those are your 4 things. So as you're kind of playing around and changing one of those 4 things, you're going to change your flavors. Typically, I get asked a lot, water, where we get our water from, and how we, how that changes. It's water runoff from, it's actually water that is the Seattle water. It's comes straight from the tap. They don't add any other filters to it. It's one of the cleanest metro waters in the country, and it doesn't add a whole lot of flavor. I always like to ask if people can tell me any tasting notes from their water, and that's why most places will try to avoid talking about water, because it's really hard to kind of explain the difference that water will take. Yeast, we actually use a brewer's Saison yeast, which gives kind of an almost apricot flavor, a very slight apricot flavor to our whiskeys. Our barley, we do 5 different types of malted barley, and that's 5 different roasted levels, basically. So we do a lot of Washington Pale Select Malt, and the one that I am most fond of personally, as far as flavor-wise, is actually the same malt that they use to make Guinness. It's a pale chocolate malt. So we kind of borrowed from our beer brewing culture that's very big here in Colorado as well as Seattle. So we are familiar with different types of beer, a wide variety of types of beer. And that's where we kind of brought in, and Matt played with a barley makeup, mash bill, so that he could find flavors that he really liked. Then with the oak, this is where we really are going to get into some of our more fun and unique things that we're coming out with Garryana. So we use American oak for right here, our American oak Westland American single malt whiskey. So this is virgin American oak cask for about 3 to 5 years. And if you get a chance to grab a hold of one of these bottles, if you have been a part of one of our master classes before, you know that you really do get like dark chocolate coffee notes. And it's a really well-rounded whiskey. We also do sherry wood, which is the same exact spirit that we age differently. We add in some sherry casks, Pedro Jimenez and Oloroso casks, that are going to give us some very, very nice, well-rounded dark fruit flavors. And then, yes, Jim, we do a peated single malt whiskey. We get our peated malt from Baird's, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, but it is in the Highlands region of Scotland. And we mix that in with our 5 malt barley bill on our peated whiskey. And that gets us 6 different types of malted barley in that peated whiskey. We do a combination of ex-bourbon and new American oak casking on that one. And it gives us kind of a very unique fun, almost a callback to Scotch, but something that's completely different of it in ourselves here. So what we're seeing here is the Skagit Valley. This is actually, we are working with breeders, growers and maltsters, and they're actually going to help us derive different types of barley. The Shelton peat bog is actually one of several peat bogs in the state of Washington, and we will talk a little bit more about that one. The Palouse region, which is where we source most of our barley from, and then Garryana oak savannas. Gary, I'm going to answer you right now. Single malt is 100% malted barley for us, made in a single distillery. So it is a single grain made in a single distillery. So when you see like blended malt or blended whiskey, that's typically multiple distilleries have made multiple different types of whiskey, brought them into one place, and then somebody blended those together. Single malt is single grain, single distillery. So now we're into our Garryana. So this one is unique. The 5th edition that we have right here is actually the first one that I'm aware of that actually has some peated malt in it. And Garryana oak, which is the focus of this. So almost all white oak used in the United States is Quercus alba. And that is a oak that is pretty prolific. We actually get our cask from Missouri, I think. And it takes about 20 years to fully mature and then to be cut down and used. Garryana oak is a different type of white oak that is native to Oregon, Washington, and actually up into Canada. It's a slow growth white oak. It actually takes 200 years to fully mature. So it's illegal to cut down. We employ people to go out and look for trees that are fallen down in windstorms or trees that are threatening power lines and have to be cut down anyways. And these are the types of things. So it's all a very sustainable way to continue to use this oak, but it's a very, very unique flavor profile. So not a whole lot of people are going to use it. In fact, I think we're the only distillery that make a release with Garryana oak. And this is where the exploration part comes in. And I actually have a video that talks a little bit about this. So let me share my computer's sound and we can hear a little bit about Garryana. This is going to work.
We saw the potential in this native oak from day one, but the honest truth is we've been lucky so far. Our early efforts with Garry Oak were intentional, but also a leap of faith. With the help of some friends at our cooperage in Oregon, we were able to find thousands of board feet of oak ready to be made into casks. But given how rare this native oak is, we can't expect this to happen time and time again. We can't simply sit back and wait for another phone call. We have to create this economy from the ground up. After last year's inaugural release of Garryana and the incredible reception it received, we're investing even more in the native oak program at Westland. Last year we filled 25 casks of Garry Oak, the year before just 10. Our plans for the future call for over 100 a year for the next 5 years. That means we need to source at least 50,000 board feet of oak. That's a lot of oak. We need to hunt down as much as we can get our hands on every time we head out. What makes this challenging is that there is no established economy in place to take advantage of all the oak that is actually out there. Quercus Garryana is an entirely new species of oak for the whiskey industry. It's completely uncharted territory. This is the exciting part, but also what makes it so difficult. Because there is no established commercial market for Garry Oak, we have to be creative. We have to get out there, talk to people, ask questions, and be willing to track down even the smallest stashes of oak. It starts with our cooper, Todd Dollinger. This man is an oak savant. He's worked in the business for decades, and he's like a bloodhound for Garry Oak. Todd is our scout, our guide, and our teacher as we travel throughout the Pacific Northwest hunting for oak. Sometimes we'll find a large, professionally run yard with stacks of oak properly milled and stickered. Sometimes we'll be pointed to small, rural farms cutting lumber for friends, family, and neighbors. And sometimes it's literally the single odd tree that fell down in someone's yard. Everything is worth investigating. To be successful, we can't leave things up to chance. We have to form meaningful, long-term relationships with these folks to secure what is a scarce supply of Garry Oak for years to come. We're not necessarily looking for wood that's ready to go right now. If we can find some that can be used to make casks right away, that's a bonus. But for the most part, once we buy the wood we're hunting for now, we'll have to season it for at least 3 years before we can use it. And after we use it to make casks, then it's going to be another 3 to 5 years before we've got whiskey to put into a bottle. 3 years before we can use it. And after we use it to make casks, then it's going to be another 3 to 5 years before we've got whiskey to put into a bottle. So like everything we do in whiskey, this is a long-term proposition that requires us to be patient and thoughtful. A big part of the process then is taking the opportunity to learn as much as we can about Garry Oak along the way. Everyone we meet teaches us a little more about this special species of native oak that creates such incredible flavor profiles in our whiskey. From where to find usable Garry Oak to how it's properly air-dried, milling techniques to the specific chemical properties of the wood. Every handshake promises new insights, and with every new insight, we have new things to apply to coopering casks and ultimately making whiskey. At each stop, we're making progress, but we constantly feel like we're behind, trying to catch up to our ambition. We're investing ourselves holistically, stewarding the process from sourcing to seasoning, milling to coopering. But there's so much to learn, and of course, so much we need to find. Working together with like-minded people who share the same values and see the same possibilities for the industry is a rewarding part of the work. Together, we're moving forward, but we still have a long way to go. Garryana is tangible evidence of an exciting new frontier in single malt whiskey. It is a manifestation of an ideal and an expression of purpose. It is as much a milestone of progress as it is an outpost on the edge of what we know is uncharted territory. This second edition is another entry in the record of what is for us an ongoing exploration into Pacific Northwest provenance.
So you heard that Pacific Northwest provenance right at the end. That's something that the gentleman that was talking was actually our master distiller at Hoffman. He was the nice red bearded dude there. Extremely, extremely passionate. And as I said, a borderline savant, if not an actual savant when it comes to whiskey. So we are on the 5th edition. I know the video said 2nd edition. So this is the 5th release that we have done. You're seeing a total bottled of 5,625 there. And again, that is due to the fact that we have a very limited supply of Garryana oak that we can use and utilize. And this is all an exploration of flavor, something that Matt is obsessed with. So we even have the fermentation time on here. Westland as a whole are very open. They will share as much as they can, however they can. And they believe that we are a true expression of terroir, which is a very French word, but that is really the influence that comes from your environment, your local environment, where it's being made, where it's being aged, as far as when it comes to spirits. So this was a minimum maturation time of 45 months with a combination grain bill of Washington Pale Select Malt and Baird's heavily peated malt. So the same place that we get our heavily peated malt for our peated whiskey, we are using in this as well. And then we are doing a combination of ex-bourbon cask and virgin Garryana oak cask. What do we think on this one? I saw a couple of things already in here as in the chat. Are we pretty excited about this whiskey? Loved it. Yes, ditto. Love it. So what we're seeing on our box right here, right where it says Westland really large, Outpost Range is right next to it. This is one of the funnest things that I think that I'm actually getting finally to be able and approved to talk about this. So our Outpost Range for Westland is a new upcoming range. Westland Garryana has been released for a few years now, a few different expressions. Steve Davidson's has it, and they have the most in the state. They're a fantastic Westland partner, have been since the beginning, so they get first dibs. And what we're seeing here with the Outpost is Garryana is now our little flagship of our Outpost range, which is an expression of oak. Then we are also going to have 2 more releases coming out in the next couple of years that are going to be, one is going to be a expression of unique barley that is grown there locally in the Skagit Valley, which is just north of where our distillery is in Seattle. And the next one coming out in 2023 is going to be an expression of peat. So that is where that local peat bog, and to our knowledge, that will be the first locally peated whiskey made in the United States. People don't peat whiskey very often. And actually, we will talk a little bit about peat when we get into our next one. But kind of keep that in mind, that almost all of the peating done in the world is done in Scotland. That slight smoke on it is because of that peat. This is one of the most beautifully balanced whiskeys that I've ever had the pleasure of tasting, especially one made in the United States that is known for bourbon, but not necessarily delicate barley whiskeys. And those 2 new Westland releases are going to be called Solum and Colere, C-O-L-E-R-E. Keep an eye out for them. I have a funny feeling Davidson's is going to have some access. So you're seeing a little more, this is Garryana oak, what we're looking with here. You're seeing it's kind of a gnarly tree. This is kind of what you think of when you look at like horror movies type thing. It doesn't offer you a whole lot of board feet, which is what this beautiful video that they showed us was telling us, is how difficult this really is to get this type of wood. It's not a very common wood. There's no industry around it. And in fact, what you're seeing here is where the Garryana vein runs. And on the left, you're seeing the habitats for Garryana in 1850, and on the right, you're seeing them as of 2017. So it is very, very limited, very scarce, which is why we can't cut it down. We have to source this sustainably. And not to skip on you, Aiden, I will have a question for you on peating in just a little bit. Hardwoods, oak has proven the best to age spirits in. It's a matter of the flavors that it provides and how it actually holds up. So that's why you're going to get more oak than your other hardwoods. And I think there's only 4, maybe 5 different types of oak that are actually used in whiskey making and spirit aging. So there's going to be Quercus Garryana now, Quercus alba, which is American white oak. There's a couple of different French white oaks that are out there. Limousin Forest has one that is big within cognac. And then Mizunara oak, which is a Japanese oak, which you really can't use. So outside of Japan, they're very specific on that. So that we have right here a whole new frontier with oak, with playing around with Garryana. We're really finding flavor profiles that nobody has experienced before. And part of us wanting to have these flavor profiles for people going forward in a couple hundred years, when we are actually doing what we can to replant Garryana oak and help to revive a borderline going extinct, endangered type of oak. So what you're seeing here is actually a Westland initiative where we went out and we plant Garryana oak trees more than we are finding taken down on the ground. And that's something that we are very adamant about giving back how we can. And Garryana oak is one of the ways that we're working on doing that. Do we have any questions on Westland, Garryana? I see a couple questions about peated, and I will get to those as soon as we get to Bruichladdich, which it's part of the fun story, but it will be all explained. So anything else besides those that have come up before we move on along? I saw a lot of positive feedback on that one, so I feel like that was a pretty big hit for most. Excellent. Well, so Angus, the peated malt is actually how we're getting the peated into the whiskey. So if we're going to talk about peat, there's no better product to talk about it than Octomore, and Octomore comes from Bruichladdich Distillery. So Bruichladdich is an Islay-based distillery, and if you are aware of Islay-based whiskeys, you have heard of peated whiskeys. So some of the big ones are Lefroy and Lagavulin, Ardbeg. All of those are neighbors to Bruichladdich. So what we have here is our Octomore. We are on the 11.1. So again, go ahead and pour yourself up a glass, and we're going to talk a little bit about the distillery. We'll talk about peating and what that actually means and what it is. And then we will get to talking and drinking some Octomore. So what you're seeing here is Bruichladdich Distillery, founded in 1881 by three brothers, the Harvey brothers. And as you can kind of see, the distillery it looks higher as you look further on into the horizon here. The water in front of this is Lockendal. And the reason why it kind of looks like it's a stepping stone up is the entire distillery was built on a slope. All of that was as per design to make it easier so that all the whiskey production moves downhill. So you don't actually have to pump or cart anything up to the top of the hill. And in 1881, that was pretty important. So when this distillery was built, it was a modern marvel, basically. It was Victorian era equipment that was state of the art. So unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at this, Bruichladdich has been mothballed, closed and opened 4 different times throughout its history. Most recently, it was closed in 1994 and then reopened in 2001 when it was purchased by a group of wine merchants who really wanted to make whiskey the way that whiskey should be made, in their opinion. So that was important because we never had this influx of cash to update. So we still have the same Victorian era equipment from 1881 in the distillery then and today. That's important because that's a large part of what makes Bruichladdich spirit and whiskey so unique, so different than what you're expecting. So we actually make 3 different types of whiskey, all from one distillery. On the left, Bruichladdich, this is the one that we started off with, this nice bright blue bottle. That is an unpeated whiskey. Then in the middle, you have Port Charlotte, which is our heavily peated whiskey. And then you have Octomore, which we're going to be tasting today. This is the super heavily peated whiskey. In fact, it's the most heavily peated whiskey in the world. And I've had a couple of questions of what is peating. So part of the distillation process when you have barley is you need that barley to, you have to malt that barley. So you take it, you harvest the barley, and you throw it out in a floor, basically, and it's however deep on a malting floor, and you add water. That's going to start the germination process of barley. What that's going to do is that's going to convert the starches in the actual grain into sugars. We want that sugar because that sugar is what the yeast is going to eat in distillation to create alcohol. So we need to stop that germination process. So part of that stopping that germination process is drying out that barley. So in Islay, there's not a whole lot of trees. There is a lot of peat. So peat is decayed plant matter over about 1 million years. It's dug up out of the ground and it looks like mud, basically. It dries out and then they burn it. In Islay, that's actually what they would burn to heat their homes way back when. So they figured that would be a good source to be a heat source to dry out the barley when they need it. So they build a peat fire underneath where this wet barley is up here, and that peat burns, and it's a very, very smoky burn. That smoke rises up through the barley, and the phenols, which is how it's actually measured, is they attach to the barley, and that flavor, that smoky flavor, persists throughout distillation. So when somebody's talking about peated whiskey, they're talking about that smoky flavor that comes from this. It is interesting. Burned mud, yes. So the what if part of Octomore comes with our master distiller, Jim McEwen. So we brought Jim McEwen in 2001. He came over from Beaumont, which is just across Lockendall on Islay. 30 years, actually known as the godfather of whiskey. And they had to start sourcing malt. And again, they wanted to be very specific where they sourced, where they were getting it from. And they wanted to know everything that they could know about this. So they went out to our maltster, which is Baird, up in the Highlands region of Scotland. And they said, okay, you're giving us peated malt measured in ppm, parts per million, and this, you're always giving it to us for Port Charlotte at 40 parts per million. How are you getting it to 40 parts per million? This doesn't seem like a very scientific process of burning something underneath something to dry it out. How does it always get to this specific range of 40 parts per million? So they said, well, what we do is we peat the barley to as high as we can get it. Then they take that barley and they send it off for testing. It's using a method called HPLC. It's very, very common within the industry. And that tells them what their ppm is, their phenolic parts per million. So if the phenolic parts per million came in after they peated it as high as they can, if it came in at 80 parts per million, then they would mix it with unpeated barley until they got to this 40 parts per million. So Jim McEwen goes, well, what do you do with that super heavily peated barley that's not cut? And they said, you don't want that. And he goes, yes, I do. I want that right now. So they brought it in. And part of what Bruichladdich has very unique to us is our really high long neck stills that produces a really light floral spirit. So Jim was really excited and intrigued about what happens if we distill a super heavily peated barley in this really high neck still that's going to produce this really light, fruity, flavorful spirit. And then he made Octomore. So the first release of Octomore came out at 80 parts per million. So this is an experiment. Nobody's really done this before. So they said, okay, part of our experiment is now to be called Octomore, it has to be at least 80 parts per million. Super scientific start, right? You're also going to go ahead and see that this is water from Octomore Farms, which you saw right here. That's an actual farm name on Isla. And we use all of the water that comes that is used to cut our whiskey comes from the well on Octomore Farms. Water doesn't have an impact in the distillation, I don't believe, but what you cut your water with, or what you cut your whiskey with, it will have an impact in the final flavor. So we were told when we distilled this whiskey, it's not going to work. It's going to be way too peated. It's not going to taste good, and we don't know what you're doing. So actually what we're looking at here is peat. Dug up, you can see almost a cliff, a ledge, and that's how they dig the peat out of the ground, flip it up, and then they toss it there until it dries out. And that's what they're burning. It looks like mud, right? So this is experimental. We're playing with this. We weren't entirely sure where to go. So we came up with a point system, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, and all of that is part of the continued experiment. So water from the Rocky Mountains, say Coors, will impact the taste differently than any water from the Highlands in Scotland. So I think, again, you get a lot of terroir is really going to impact your final flavors. So water, again, it's hard to determine tasting notes from water. So it's hard to really give it it's hard to put your finger on what is the actual change that water will impact. But there is a slight difference from where you get your water from. Aiden, we are drinking 11.1. So part of the experiment is you have to have a control. The 0.1 series is the control. So this will always be 100% Scottish grown barley, and we will age this in first fill ex-American whiskey casks. 5 years old on average, sometimes older. And our phenolic parts per million on this one is 139.6. ABV comes out with the 59.4% ABV. So we're not cask strength, because we are adding a couple of drops of water from Octomore Spring Farms, and that's part of staying consistent with how we've continually done it. Our Octomore 0.2, which you're seeing right here, right next to the 0.1, is a global travel retail exclusive. So very rarely will you get to get the chance to grab a 0.2 series. And if you do, I highly recommend it. This is an experiment in European oak. So they usually have some sort of wine casking or ex-cognac or whatever. There are some really, really fun and unique European oak that I know we have aging in the warehouse right now. The next one is our 0.3. So you're going to notice a difference in color of the bottle. So Bruichladdich as a whole, we do everything 100% Scottish barley. But part of us pushing the boundaries and having this conversation is we also do the exact same whiskey with 100% Isla grown barley. So terroir, again, that word keeps coming back. Does it really matter where you grow your barley? Get you a bottle of 11.1, get you a bottle of 11.3, put them next to each other and have yourself a little taste, and they will be starkly different whiskeys. All of our barley for our 0.3 series comes from Octomore Farms on Isla. So this is a single farm whiskey. This one came out at 194 parts per million, and you're seeing a little difference, right? 139.6 to 194, a little difference in ABV. All of this is a little different, changing in per release. Actually, the highest ppm release that we have ever done was Octomore 8.3, and it came out at 309.1 part per million. Somebody asked, higher than Ardbeg. Ardbeg sits around 45 to 48 parts per million. So the one that you have in front of you right now with the, excuse me, I don't know where that went. The 11.1 is almost 4 times, 3 times, definitely more than 3 times higher than Ardbeg is. So the last one that we do is typically we do a unique one that's either a 0.4 or a 10-year. This year we are on a 10-year. It's 208 parts per million and 54.3% ABV. So we either have a 10-year release or we have a 0.4 release. The 0.4 release is a virgin oak experiment. So I believe Davidson still has some of the 10.4. It is the whiskey that should not be. So the legal minimum age for whiskey coming out of Scotland to be called Scotch is 3 years in oak barrels. So we released a heavily peated 3-year-old Scotch that is pretty high in ABV, pretty high in parts per million, phenolic parts per million, and too young. So in theory, that should be like the worst whiskey you drink. It has won awards throughout multiple publications for being like the best whiskey of 2019. It's insane. This experiment that that they've been doing with Octomore has really netted us an opportunity to look at terroir and peat and how we can really take something that people say should not be enjoyable and turn it into probably one of the best whiskeys that that you will have. So we have this 11.1 in front of us. I have already seen a lot of people have tried it. They're interested. What are we thinking? What kind of notes are we getting from this? Does this taste like nothing but dirt? Or is there a lot of unique flavors going on in here? For something this high in ABV, this is, I believe this is the highest ABV spirit that we've had tonight, which it is. This ought to burn the most. This ought to be the biggest kick in the teeth. But Bruichladdich, with these super tall, long neck stills, produces a very, very well balanced spirit. So Angus, boom. What you start with is this sweet, almost floral, right on the front of the palate. And then as you hit the back, when the heat really would start to take effect, that's when the peat comes in and kind of washes away all that warmth. And it really just kind of smooths it out and really gives you this well-rounded flavor. Exactly. Tell me I can't. Let me show you I can. So we talked about Jim McEwen. This is actually his protege, Adam Hannett, another young individual, about 33. Learned everything he knows about master distilling from Jim McEwen. Very humble, very intelligent, a palate that is insane. And he's been producing the last several releases of Octomore and Black Art, if you're familiar, for the last several years. If you get the opportunity and you want to learn a little bit more about Jim McEwen and Bruichladdich as a whole, they actually made a documentary about him. We didn't pay for this. It was 100% people were super excited to learn about Jim McEwen. And it's called The Golden Dream. It is on Amazon Prime, I believe. Highly, highly recommend taking a evening, sitting down, watch it. I believe it's about an hour and a half long. It's a full professional production. It will go through Bruichladdich Distillery. It will go through the life of Jim McEwen. And it talks about Octomore. It talks about Black Art, which is our unique expression that we don't tell anybody anything about. And it is beautifully, beautifully done. So Aiden, 750s are at Davidson's. Do we have any questions about Bruichladdich as a whole? Do we have any questions about Westland, Mount Gay? There you go. Sherry, that's a wonderful way to put that. You got to get one to drink and enjoy with friends, and one to put aside when nobody, when you just want to look at what you have. Parker, some people do oak chips and then they like blast it with music. I think Metallica makes a whiskey that they blast with Metallica music. It's a rapid aging technique. It's pretty easy to tell when a whiskey has been rapidly aged like that. There's just oak needs time to do its thing, and throwing oak chips in spirit and hitting it with sonic waves doesn't really give it the justice that that non-rapid aging will do. Rapid aging will get you a product that you can put out and really kind of start to show you what you are what you're working with, but it's good when you're really starting out and making whiskey in like your garage or something like that. I have a friend that's doing it right now, but nothing will give you the product that setting it aside for 5 to 10 years will do. Just a couple drops of water, Jim. So the original Octomore 1.1, was 100% Scottish barley. It was aged for about 5 years, and when they released it, they knew what they had. They knew it was delicious, but it was kind of a let's get a start going and let's get people interested in what we have. I had the immense honor of trying the Octomore 1.1 after it had been aging for, so the first run of whiskey of Octomore came out in 2002. So I got to try it last year in 2019. So I got to try 17-year-old Octomore, and it was phenomenal. Just that extra time playing around in that wood turned into just some absolutely amazing liquid. So the concept 0.1 is the 0.1s that we still see now, because that's the control. So we didn't really change that. So the 0.2s were changing. The 0.3s are really just 100% Isla barley. So that's your difference between the 0.1 and the 0.2. And then the 0.4s are typically where you're going to get the wild and different and something that nobody else is doing before. Getting back to some of these questions, Brian. Mount Gay, it's really dependent on what you want to do. If you're making a lot of cocktails like daiquiris and whatnot, the Black Barrel is amazing. If you prefer more neat sipping and old fashions, the Mount Gay XO is stellar for an everyday kind of thing. And the Port Cask and the Master Blender collection they're nice to have, because then you can really, again, all of these are experimental. All three of the spirits that we tried today are experimental. So you really get to kind of experience what the Master Blender is trying to do, and sometimes the future of the distillery, depending on who you're talking about. Yes, Nicole and James, I will share that simple syrup recipe. I will get that over to Danielle and I will have her send that out. Let's see here. Trying to make sure I haven't missed any questions yet. So a lot more of that back end bite that you're getting is going to be a lot more because of the proof. If the bite was coming from not being aged long enough, we would have increased the amount of time on the oak. We have some that has had obviously more time on oak, and it doesn't really change that back end bite. That's really just the high ABV aspect that's getting you to that point. That's a good question with Eric. I don't keep a whole lot of open bottles because usually if I open it, I drink it. But if you store whiskey correctly, you don't let it get corked, like you don't let the cork dry out. You can store it for quite some time. I do have some bottles down there that have been down there open for a better part of a decade, but as long as you make sure the cork stays wet and it's not drying out, you should be okay. You get a nice little like alcohol layer on top that prevents the spirit from going bad, like you get with wine, where if you open a bottle of red wine, it'll go bad after a couple of days. You don't really get that with whiskey because of that nice little alcohol layer that happens there. 4 days is not too long. You're good. If you are drinking it every day, you typically don't have to worry too long about or too much about keeping it too long. Jim, Austin, do I have a what? I do. I have a degree in psychology, not in whiskey. I have a degree in psychology and a minor in biology. So it's I like to think I learned all of my whiskey knowledge on the streets, you know, but really I am blessed to have direct contact with master distillers, all of our master distillers for my brands and my portfolio. So if I have questions, I can reach out and I usually get answers very, very quickly. With Octomore, actually, Lynn McEwen, who is Jim McEwen's daughter, I have her cell phone numbers, and she has flat out told us, like, give her a call if we ever have any questions, and she will run the phone over to her dad, and he will tell us the answer. So I am blessed to have access to a wealth of knowledge, and that is something that I'm very passionate about. So they do have a sommelier type like registration or certification for whiskey, scotch, and bourbons. I don't know exactly off the top of my head what it's called, but it is not quite as, it's not as prestigious as a sommelier program is. Sommeliers programs are very in-depth, and if you ever find like a master sommelier, you have yourself a very, very dedicated and very intelligent individual with that. So yes, drink more whiskey, but also when you are looking at learning more about whiskeys, nailing down flavors, things like that, I have flavor wheels. So when I'm drinking whiskey, I have my flavor wheel in front of me, a new whiskey, and I'm looking at what flavors that I'm really kind of drilling down. And when I really got started into drinking whiskey, I had full pairing almost, where I would bring in a lot of foods that I was told should be the flavors that I'm tasting in whiskey, and I would have them set out in front of me, and I would take a little taste of whiskey and I'd be like, okay, so now I'm smelling all of the different foods, trying to figure out exactly what the smell is, what the flavor is, and then I'm tasting them a little bit. And once you really kind of start to nail down, like, okay, that's the dark chocolate flavor profile, that's what figs taste like, that's what this tastes like, then you can really just start to expand and sound smarter than you are when you when you have taken the time to really kind of sit down, drink the whiskey, and put the things in front of you. There you go. Oh, so Bruichladdich weird. I've had issues because I have tried to order bottles from the distillery, and working for the distillery, I still have my issues. I have to send them down to a friend in Texas. We get all of the unique releases that the country gets. Again, Davidson's is a huge partner, a fantastic partner with both Westland, Bruichladdich, and Mountain Gay, all of our brands, really. But for Westland and Bruichladdich, they get the releases that come to the state. So anything that comes to the country comes to the state. And we get them in with Davidson's. And anything that's not in the country, that's where you got to find a buddy in one of those states to have them to have Bruichladdich ship it to them, and then maybe go and meet up with them. That's what I have to do with my buddy down in Texas. So whiskey, I'm a big fan of like Manhattans, whiskey sours. Old fashions are a really good way to really kind of play with the flavors really easily. Danielle's yelling out whiskey sour. There's a lot of really good, if you have a higher end whiskey, I would definitely look for more of a spirit forward cocktail as a way to really kind of show it justice and give it the screen time, I guess it might be a good way to put it. Let it really kind of shine. Gary, when I can find Demerara sugar, I will use it. This was turbinado sugar. It's a close second. I try not to do just like regular table sugar. I try not to do that if I'm making simple syrup. And yes, done. Different bitters. Super easy way to really kind of change up your old fashioned. There are dozens of bitters out there minimum to find. I have really kind of become a fan of the Aztec chocolate bitters in an old fashioned with Westland American oak. Do a little bit of that and a little bit of orange bitters. I did just get some Jamaican bitters today that are kind of unique. I kind of want to play around a little bit more of those and see. And black walnut bitters are really good as well in an old fashioned. Want to make sure I didn't miss any other questions. And like I said, I will send Danielle over that simple syrup recipe, and she'll be able to send that out in an email, I believe, as an extra little thing for you guys. I've been making a lot of different ones all winter to kind of get me to this holiday spirit. But also, I want to say thank you to HRCA. I want to say huge thank you to Davidson's as well. And I believe they're on the chat, but they have done something that we probably will never see ever again. They're offering a discount for, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rebecca, but they're offering that 10% discount on the special editions as well. So something that has never been done before. It probably will never be done again unless we're still in lockdown a year from now, which let's all hope that that's not the case. But Rebecca is saying 10% off. So 10% off of these special editions. That's huge. And Davidson's will have, again, they have the most of the stock in the state, but what you see on shelves is what they have. So once that is gone, it is gone. You will not be able to find it anymore until the next release comes out next year. So I always say get them soon and enjoy them sooner. It's a lot easier to listen to me talk with a drink in my hand. That's something I learned bartending about a decade ago, that people find me a lot more interesting when they've got a little social lubricant going. Well, if there's no more questions, I'm hoping I caught everything. If not, thank you guys so much. I'm sorry I missed your question. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and enjoy your evening. Enjoy the holidays, and hopefully everybody stays healthy and well.
Thank you, Austin. We really appreciate you being with us tonight. And thank you, everybody that's on this call, for joining us in these virtual events. We do have our last happy hour, our last Highlands Ranch happy hour next Thursday, if you guys are interested, before the end of the year. And then we will start them up again in January. But if you're interested in that, it's going to be Christmas cocktails. So some fun Christmas cocktails. Check that out on our website, and you can get that information in the shopping list. And we also just are about to announce that we're going to do a Bruichladdich masterclass. So the first one that you had, the Bruichladdich Classic Lottie, that will be in the range of that you'll be tasting. We're going to do that in January, January 25th, to celebrate Burns Night, which is a holiday in Scotland. So if you want to join us back again for that, it'll be another one very similar to this, of where you'll buy a ticket, we'll give you a sample kit, and we can follow along like this with Austin. So yeah, with that, thank you for being with us. Thank you, Austin, and thank you, Davidsons. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Where's the after party?
Thanks.
Austin, Danielle, where is it? Jim's house? Angus? It's got to be at Angus's house. Right?
I think
on
Angus
over.
was hosting it.
Come on over.
Where'd Jamie Noble go?
She ran. As soon as she heard that she was hosting the after party, she took off.
I'm waiting to hear where Dawn comes up with
Oh,
it.
there she is.
Jamie, be careful what you ask for.
It was wonderful, Austin. Thank you so much. It was really a nice presentation with a lot of different choices.
Thank you. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and I know I had a good time drinking all these different spirits tonight. So sets me
As
off
did
on a
we,
good
and we're
Thursday
very
night.
happy we don't have to drive.
Yeah, even better, because I'm just going to call in sick to work tomorrow. So
Thanks again. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Good to see you.